everybody, Tom Vasel here, and we are going through 40 years of great games. We are now back a decade from today in the year 2007, and some great games came out this year. It is, in my opinion, one of the top 10 years of gaming. In fact, what do I have? Get Bit, Cutthroat Caverns, Dust, Vikings, and Jamaica are all fantastic games that did not make my top 10. Well, what games did make my best tabletop games of this era? Let's go ahead and take a look. Number 10, Hamburgum. Now, Hamburgum is a game that uses a rondel, which is moving pieces around. And I'm not a big fan of these games, mostly designed by Matt Gertz. They just don't usually catch my attention, but Hamburgum did. The theme first caught my attention. It's about building churches. Okay, that's interesting, but there's got to be more to it than that. But the gameplay here was just so smooth and fun as you collected different resources and then use those resources to get the different materials, including a little bell to build the building. But again, I'm not just enamored here by the theme. The actual gameplay itself was quite good. That's Hamburgum. Number 9 is Archaeology, the card game, which just was reprinted this year from Z-Man Games. Now, this game from Phil Walker Harding was his, well, it wasn't his first game. His first game was Archaeology, the board game, which didn't do very well. But his card game really kind of brought him to attention to now where he is a top designer. And this game here, which you just collected different artifacts and traded them back and forth, a very simple card game, but was easy to play and a lot of fun, and one that I still have in my collection now. Number 8 was another game. Last time I mentioned The Birth of CGE. Through the Ages was a game that certainly brought them to people's attention. Galaxy Trucker helped put them on the map. Now, Galaxy Trucker is most definitely a love it or hate it game. My compatriots hate it, but I really enjoy it. You're building a spaceship as fast as you can, and then everyone's spaceships fly through meteor storms and space pirates and all sorts of bad things, and you watch them blow up, and hopefully parts of them survive enough for you to make it through. It's still being sold 10 years later, a couple expansions, big box, lots of stuff going on, and a lot, for me, of just total sheer fun. Number 7 is 1960. Now, I mentioned Twilight Struggle, which was an amazing game. 1960 was the follow-up on that one. This one, also from Z-Man Games, kind of dropped the level down. It was not nearly as complex as Twilight Struggle, but it took place covering one of the closest elections in American history, that between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And it allowed players to go around and try to get votes into different states and fight over this, and eventually there was an election at the end of the game, and one candidate would win. A solid game. It wasn't as good as Twilight Struggle, but it brought some of the coolness of that system into a much more accessible arena for people to play with. Very fun game, 1960. Number 6, and this one's probably number 1 for many people, is Agricola. Now, Agricola needs to be talked about here. First of all, it's not on my list as high because its successor, Caverna, has replaced it, which is why it dropped down here. But Agricola still was an amazing game. This game helped Z-Man, again, this was like Z-Man's year, helped Z-Man considerably. They did this through pre-order because they weren't sure people would want such a big, giant Euro game with so many pieces. Guess what? People did want it. The pre-orders came into this game, immediately shot to the top of the ratings. People were raving about it and still rave about it to this day. Agricola basically took a lot of these complex games, but this one was all about, hey, all these cool things, and it gave you these wide open options with cards, and it just offered more choices in a Euro-style game than had been done to this point, and also took Uwe Rosenberg, who up to this point, he had been known for making light card games like Bonanza and things like that. And now he had made a game that was a full powerhouse, and over the next coming years, this is what he was best known for. But a great game, still in print to this day. Mayfair is really making a big push on it. Just released a family version of it. That's Agricola. Number 5 was a Spiel des Jahres nominee, and that's Thebes. Thebes was a game about going and searching for archaeological relics out in the middle of nowhere. And you did so by actually going into a bag and pulling out tiles and hoping you got good stuff rather than blank stuff. And you could spend time in this game. The more time you spent, the more pulls you had, but you don't want to spend too much time. So it was very intriguing as you mixed getting knowledge and time and making digs at the right moment. There was certainly luck in pulling from those bags, but even doing so, the act of doing that was very thematic and one that I enjoyed, which is why I like Thebes. Number 4 is Colosseum. This was Days of Wonder's big production of the year. They usually did one big production game each year. Coliseum was about putting on a show in your Coliseum, and it wasn't actually about combat and stuff, so that confused people for a while, but about collecting resources and then putting on this fantastic show. And there was 5 rounds in the game, and each round you put a show, and your highest score from any of those rounds, usually round 5, but not always, was your total score for the game. And so you were trying to manipulate the Emperor into watching your show, and the senators, and trying to get season pass tickets and get the star players in your show. And it's a gorgeous, beautiful production, and it's a lot of fun, and it's being reprinted this year by Tasty Minstrel Games. So I'm glad for that. Coliseum. Number 3 brought a new mechanism to the table, and that's dice placement. That's Kingsburg. Nowadays, there's a lot of games with dice placement where you take dice and put them on the board, but Kingsburg really brought it to the forefront, where each player would roll 3 dice, and then you could put them in 3 different areas, or 2 dice in one area, or all 3 in the same place. Of course, hopefully not someone else not blocking you there. A very simple game with fun artwork as you collect different resources, build buildings. There's really not a lot to this game, but it's still one that plays incredibly well and very fast and fun, and still in my collection, Kingsburg. Number 2 was a game nobody really expected. This was the ending of the Eagle games, which has since morphed into Eagle Griffin games, but they were almost dead at this point. And in fact, Age of Empires 3, or whatever it's called now, it had multiple names, was actually produced by Tropical Games. But Glenn Drover up to this point had made big Axis and Allies style games, War, Age of Imperialism, the Civil War, and these games were fun, but you've noticed you haven't seen any of them show up on my top 10 so far. And yet here we have one that shot up to number 2 on this list. And that's because this was a worker placement game, but it was also an area control game, and it let you place different types of workers, and it had gorgeous plastic pieces, and it looked like one of these big games with plastic pieces, but it played like a Euro game, and people were coming over and going, oh, I actually do like this. And first when I played it, I was amazed. I said, I can't believe how fun this game is. And I still like it today, still in my collection. Oh, that's right, Empire's Age of Discovery is the new name. I should have just turned around. And my favorite game from the year 2007, a card game, which is still one of my favorite games, and that is Race for the Galaxy. Race for the Galaxy was a game in which kind of built a little bit on the Puerto Rico, the card game, San Juan, and Puerto Rico, and I'm not really sure which one of these came first. They said maybe that Race for the Galaxy had been designed before San Juan, but what matter? It doesn't matter. It took that idea of having cards that could be resources, or they could be, in this case, planets, or technologies, or you're using them to pay for other cards, and did so in such a extremely strategic, fun game. There's so much depth in Race for the Galaxy now. They've come out with like 6 expansions now, and some of them are good or not, but the base game for Race for the Galaxy was still probably the best. Very classic, very simple. There's a lot of luck at first, it seems, when going through that deck, but there is not, to the point where if I play someone who's not played before, I feel very confident I will beat them because there's that much involved, and I actually like playing it with experienced players. It's one of the few games I'm like, do you know how to play? Because let's play. And there is a lot of, there's a lot of iconography. It's not easy to teach new people, but it's great. It's amazing and in-depth game. Also, fantastic artwork, Race for the Galaxy. So those are my favorite games from 2007. What are your favorite games from that year? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, you've been watching 40 Years of Great Gaming. I'm your host, Tom Vasel, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.